What's up, YouTube? We're going to do something that I've thought about doing for a while today. For the most part, I find that like the Facebook music theory groups tend to be a form of like self-torture for me. The kind of stuff that pops up on my feed makes me wonder why I am in those groups to begin with. But that being said, in preparation for this video, upon revisiting these groups, I was actually pleasantly surprised to find that a lot of the quality of the posts has gone up. A while back, when I went into these groups, there would be no shortage of posts about how music theory is not important, about how real musicians don't use theory, they just use their, whatever God-given talents or whatever you want to call it. And they inevitably point to like, Jimi Hendrix or the Beatles or something, some really, high profile example of people who allegedly didn't use music theory. But at the end of the day, music theory, I think, gets a bad rap because people think of it as a set of rules that you're supposed to follow when you write and play music, and that really couldn't be farther from the truth. Maybe at one point in time, the professional music world was more strict about that kind of thing, and there were more rigid boundaries as far as like the norms of composition and what was or wasn't acceptable in the music. Music theory is simply just language. It is a way that we communicate musical ideas with a vocabulary that we can, to a large degree, understand each other on. And if you shun music theory and you don't like music theory, what you're basically saying is you don't care to learn really simpler ways to discuss the same ideas. Knowing music theory is as simple as if I'm in a jam session or something and we're writing a song or whatever, and I want someone to play an E instead of a C at a certain part, I could say play an E here instead of a C here. I could say play the third, or I could say play, the root, as opposed to like having to sing the note to somebody or having to physically point out the note on their instrument, or playing the note for them and having them have to figure it out by ear or whatever it is. Like, those are all valid methods. There's nothing inherently wrong with doing it that way. As long as you can all agree on the same thing and get there together, there's nothing wrong with that. Music theory just makes it a lot easier and more direct. Likewise, if more complex things, like if I want to hear a certain melodic run, instead of saying, hey, could you play something more like da 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 da, I could say, hey, could you play, like the first four notes of a major scale in this part or something. That's the idea. It's not about like, oh, you can't go to that chord because that chord doesn't function right to go to the next chord. It's not part of this key or whatever. And it's not about knowing that no one else around you is going to understand what you're saying so you can feel, superior or something. It's not about that either. It's just about a language that you use to communicate a musical idea to another person without, too much ambiguity, right? So just like you would learn any other language, like if you are talking to someone in another language and you don't have a translator, you could point and make gestures and do a bunch of things to try to get them to understand you, or you could learn the words for those things and just tell them. That being said, it also does help understanding how things function, because instead of doing everything by trial and error, and if you're not gifted with an amazing ear or anything like that, you have a set of tools of most use case scenarios and stuff that you can play through and see what sounds best to you. And you know how things work, so you can actually like spend the time experimenting with the theory to come up with something and see, if you like this chord progression better or that chord progression better, or maybe like a substitution here or there, instead of, always relying on your ear. Maybe there's something that you just can't seem to nail down, and it's a specific sound, and you're not quite sure what it is, and you hunt and hunt and hunt, and you have the hardest time trying to figure out what it is. If you were more versed in your music theory, you might recognize, oh, well, this is that, borrowed chord, just like in this song, right? You'll have like use case examples that you can pull from and recognize it by another name. Seeing someone that like John, and going up to them and being like, hey, John, right? That you don't spell out their name, you know them as John. So it's this collection of things that you put together as one thing to express, that identity. And that's the same kind of thing with music theory there too. Instead of like, it's like this feeling into this feeling and this sound into this sound, oh, well, this is a 4 and then a minor 4, and then whatever, verbiage you have within music theory to identify those things. You can use that and just make things a lot simpler. Let's take a look at some of these posts in the theory group. We're going to start with this question. So what is the formula for A major scale? For a major scale, not A major. So I'm assuming when this person is asking what the formula is for a major scale, they're asking about how they can identify a major scale no matter what the tonic is. There's a few different ways that you can think about it, but I tend to teach people based on half steps and whole steps. If they have any kind of experience with piano, I tend to use the piano keyboard to help visualize this. I also sometimes will start people out with understanding the music alphabet. I think the most simple and comprehensive way that I can explain the formula for a major scale would be understanding first that your music alphabet is A to G, and you have a half step between B and C and a half step between E and F. Those are the only places where you have a half step. Then after that, understand that if you go from C to the next C, you're playing a major scale. When you understand those two things, if you look at that and you go step by step, you go C to D, that's a whole step, right? So 2 half steps together, right? And then D to E is a whole step. E to F, that's one of the half steps that we have in the music alphabet. F to G, that's a whole step. G to A, that's a whole step. A to B is a whole step. B to C is a half step. So you get this pattern of whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. I think I did that right. Whole, 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 half, whole, 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 half. Yes. Or tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. That's the easiest way to think about the major scale. And then once you understand that, no matter what your tonic note is or where your root is, that formula is going to stay the same for any note if you follow that pattern. Okay, on to the next one. Is there a formula of relative minor keys, please? So again, I don't remember if this is the same person or not asking for a bunch of formulas, but this one, I think what they're asking is how to identify relative major and minor keys. Piggybacking on the last thing about the major scale. If you're looking at the major scale and you're starting from the first note and then moving through, you're going to have 7 notes and then the same starting note again, an octave higher, right? The next one up. So we would go C and we would call C 1, and then D would be 2, and then we'd have E, F, G, A, B, and then C again at the octave. So when you do it that way, the 6th note that you get to is going to be where your relative minor key begins. A relative key, if you think about how like my relatives and I share DNA, keys, if we think about the notes of the key as the DNA, share those notes, share that DNA. So a relative key is going to be a key that has all the same notes, but starts at a different point. And that is always going to be, when you're going from the major key to the minor key, you're always going to be on the 6th note of that key. That's one way you can think about it. So if I start at C, I go C, D, E, F, G, A, and I know my relative minor is going to start from that A. and it's going to be all the same notes. So if I go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, then I'm playing my A minor scale, right? And I'm in the key of A minor, which also has no sharps or flats. The way that I typically think about it is a minor third down from my root to get to the minor, the relative minor. Or if I want to go from minor to major, I go a minor third up. If you're in the minor key and you're trying to find the relative major key, then that's going to be on the third. So A, B, C, right? And it's going to work that way no matter what key you're in, right? What do we got here? Cycling through the diatonic triads of the C major scale, starting from F, F, A, C, and ending back at F, A, C. Each of these is a stack of thirds. Classic triad building. Walking the stairway of triads. The building blocks of harmony. D, F, A, D minor, F, A, C, loops back to start. Okay. Cycling through the... Well, let's... This is the kind of stuff that used to torment me that popped up on my feed. So let's talk through this step by step. So cycling through the diatonic triads of the C major scale. So diatonic is a word that refers to using only the notes of the key. So if you use anything, like if we're again using the C major example, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, if we're using any notes sharp or flat outside of that, then we are using notes that are not part of the key. So the stuff that we use with those notes would be considered non-diatonic. I'm not sure why we're talking about the C major scale and then starting from F. All right, hold on. Let's go to F, A, C, F major, A, C, E, A minor, C, E, G, C major. I'm trying to figure out what kind of a pattern they're locking in on here. I mean, it's a useful thing to understand that triads are built in thirds. Any equal pattern that you apply, moving in one direction or another across the 12 notes, is going to eventually come back to the starting point. So I don't understand what that is trying to say. I just don't know what the point is. I have no idea why start with F, to be honest. Yeah, I'm not sure what the point of this post is. It's just kind of like stating a fact. So that's cool. Been working on a new calendar/clock. What do you think about 7:30 day months and 5:31 day months? This is the key of C. We're gonna move on. I need to have like one of those boards, those cork boards with all the pictures and letters and stuff and the red yarn pinned everywhere. You don't understand. The months are key signatures. August is dough. I don't know. What's next? Let's try this one. Some believe that music theory is not necessary to be a musician. It's true, I suppose. While others say all musicians use music theory. Actually, I'm going to back that up. I don't think, while you technically could get paid to play music, music theory is very much a part of the art and discipline of music, right? You wouldn't call yourself an electrician if you didn't understand how electricity worked. I don't know. You wouldn't call yourself a mechanic if you didn't understand how a car worked. You wouldn't call yourself a doctor if you didn't understand the systems of the human body and how they interact, right? So you could, I mean, you can doctor up a wound, you can change your oil, you can learn to solder some parts, right? But that doesn't really qualify you as an expert in those fields, right? Or you know, entitle you to the moniker of electrician or mechanic or doctor, right? So why is music an exception here? Why can you call yourself a musician if you don't understand how the music works, right? If you can't like see how the parts interact and understand that. You can play music. You could, you know, you could even probably play with other people and play pretty well. But I don't know. I don't know. I personally, you know, my personal opinion, which I'm not forcing anybody else to adopt as absolute fact, is that you should, if you're a musician and you call yourself a musician, you should understand music theory. It doesn't have to be like the most outstanding understanding of music theory, but you should have an idea of what you're doing and what you're talking about in a way that is deeper than just the sound of it and the feeling, right? That's just my opinion. While others say all musicians use music theory, even if they can't articulate the vocabulary. Okay, but music theory in kind of a big way is the vocabulary. If I can recreate a song or I can identify a scale by ear and play that scale, even if I can tell somebody like, no, this scale is going to work better for this song just because my ear tells me, like that is a kind of an intuitive understanding of music theory. It's kind of a limited use of music theory, but maybe it's simply a matter of style when it comes to how we approach music theory. So if you view music theory as having a full range of uses, you can better understand another musician's perspective on it. If you view music theory as having a full range of uses, I'm not sure what that means. I think maybe it's trying to say like if you have a comprehensive understanding of music theory, then you can communicate better with other musicians who understand the music theory or don't, right? If you know the music theory, you can communicate with both sets of people. For example, a musician could be a theory minimalist, which means they understand just enough to get the sound and emotional quality that they want, but they largely rely on their instincts and focus on developing their own personal playing techniques. Sure, I suppose. The other side would be a theory maximalist who purposefully learns as much theory as possible in order to apply it to their own composition. The focus here would be more on writing and benefiting their ability to communicate it to other musicians. Okay. No. So, yeah, you could call yourself a music theory minimalist, right? Which is a fancy way of saying I don't know a lot of music theory. Or I don't care to learn, right? And because the idea here, I think, that they're suggesting is that you can't rely on your instincts and focus on your personal playing technique and the emotive quality of music and be versed in music theory. It's one or the other, right? Kind of black or white. That's not the case. Understanding music theory does not make you less capable of relying on your instincts or exploring or experimenting. I would argue that it makes you more capable. I think the reason this kind of a perspective is out there is because a lot of the time, and I was guilty of this too, I think 90% of musicians that pursue music education go through this. There's a phase where you start learning music theory where you want to flex it, right? You feel like now you understand a whole new side of music, so you want to try to use it all the time. And you try to impose it on everything that you do musically. And a lot of the time you may not even understand fully what you're doing. You're just like doing what you think you know. But it gets deeper and deeper and deeper. It's one of those things that You will never really know all of music theory. You'll just know more and more and more, because it's like endless. And so I think those people that, you get to that phase, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that don't ever get past that phase. But what is beyond that is a place of like real understanding of music theory, and the place where you tend to throw those rules out. You know they're there, you understand how they work, you use them to analyze things, but they're not your engine, right? They're tools. Your driving force as a musician is, because it's an art and it's a creative pursuit. So your driving force as a musician is always going to be from here, and your mind and your heart and everything and your soul. The theory just helps you guide that. They're tools to use, right? It's like I can hammer a nail in a board with a rock, which would represent like all instinct, right? Like I need this nail to go into this board. There's a rock that's hard. I'm gonna bash it with the rock. I'm gonna make it go in that board, right? But music theory is like I have this tool that is purposed to drive that nail into that board with minimal effort, and bing, there it is. I've got the nail in the board, right? It's just a tool. The other side would be a theory maximalist who purposefully learns as much theory as possible in order to apply it in their own compositions. Again, trying to conflate understanding music theory with a rigid creative process of forcing everything you do through it. Why? Why would it be more on writing? Like benefiting their ability to communicate to musicians, yes. It is a useful tool for communicating to other musicians because we're all on the same page. And I can say something to you and you know exactly what I mean, and then you make that sound happen, right? So I don't have to mime the sound to you. I see what they were going for here. They're trying to cater to both crowds, but it is very binary thinking. How do you utilize music theory? Do you gravitate toward one of these examples, or do you have another purpose for it? So music theory is just an understanding. It's the study of music and how it functions and interacts. I'm teaching someone songwriting right now, and we just started talking about how to leverage and analyze and leverage an understanding of chord progressions in your songwriting. So instead of just strumming around randomly until you land on something that you like, which can yield great results. Some of the best stuff that I've written has been just noodling, right? But instead of doing that, you have a place to start from. So if there's a song that you really like, or a section of a song that you really like because the sound speaks to you, you analyze it and say, oh, okay, that's what that's doing, and now I'm going to use that when I write a song. And then when you write yours, you borrow that progression, you can move it to a different key, you can change the order, you can add chord substitutions, you can add secondary dominants, you can add extensions and color chords, you can reharmonize, change the melody, you can go anywhere with it, right? But you're starting with a foundation of something that you know speaks to you emotionally and has a sound that you want to convey, and you're just playing in that area of the sandbox, right? Instead of like just running around forever trying to figure it out. So I mean, it's a fair post, it's a valid post, but I think they're just a little bit off the mark. It's well spirited, I think, well intentioned. What would playing guitar confidently look like for you? And this guy says the Messiah will come again, live, or live. No, there's no comma. The Messiah will come again, live. I'm all for setting lofty goals for your guitar journey, right? You should have a high bar for yourself, but don't think that your guitar abilities have to bring about the second coming of Jesus. I don't think you're going to be like summoning any messiahs with, no matter how good you play that song, I don't think you're going to call forth the Messiah again. It's commendable though. Good luck. Good luck. Guitar, don't you? Yes, I love it. So why not just that's you get the burn cream. that's brutal.
Fatality.
It's good though. I like it. Oh, yeah, one of these. Post Metatron portal to view correctly, gaze at center and allow the sounds and images to wash over you. Do not try to focus on one sound or image. Allow them to pass. Yeah, this is more of that, I don't know, man. Some of these people are just on another level. I don't know if I should be envious or not. They must feel pretty good. I don't know. Maybe I don't get it. Maybe it's me. Maybe I have not ascended to the next realm of understanding to process such genius. All right. Controversial opinion. I have always pondered why we still call it theory when so many of us use the same theory daily to speak to each other and understand what's going on with music we didn't personally write. Why do you think we haven't dropped the theory term if so many practically use it? My opinion is that it shouldn't be called theory because no quotations there. Because it is a term that stops people from learning deeper music and understanding it. That's a hot take. Controversial opinion. But how is it theoretical if I send you notes and you can play them? To me, the language of Spanish is more theoretical than music theory because they do it differently in different places. But if I send my theoretical notes to someone who speaks a different language than me, they understand. Okay, that's not theoretical. Theories aren't proven, but music structure has been. Please discuss. Okay, so music has long been called a universal language. One thing that always fascinated me about music is I always kind of, as a kid especially, wish that I had like some type of a device where I could point it at people and I could blast them and they would feel the emotions that I feel so that we could have a deeper understanding of each other. And it didn't occur to me for a long time that that's kind of what music does. When I play, if I'm feeling sad and I play a sad song for somebody, they feel that feeling, right? If I am happy and I play a happy song for somebody, maybe it lifts their spirits a little bit, So it kind of does that. So yeah, it is kind of a universal language. It's like speaking directly from one heart to another. But it is not necessarily directly understandable one-to-one as far as notation goes. There is a standard notation now. It's called standard notation. That was developed over a long period of time. I wrote a whole blog post about it over on the website at greenkeymusic.com/blog, I think. How it started with the monks, and the notation looked very different than it does now. And a lot of it started out kind of as a general direction. Like this note, you start at a note kind of like this, and then you kind of like go up from here and up a little higher on the next one, and then you come down really low on the next one. And that was fine, but it made it very difficult for when people wanted to start singing in harmony and using multiple parts to harmonize together, because everybody's just kind of in a different place, starting in a different place, moving to a different place. So music evolved to be standard notation that we have now. And even then, some people read tablature, right? Not because they don't know how to read standard notation, but because it's an accessible option to them for their instrument. And someone who doesn't have an instrument with tablature might not understand tablature at all. Like Chinese flute, and I think when I learned erhu, it uses this system of the scale tones with different symbols denoting like octave ranges and note length and things like that. So not standard notation at all. So it's not necessarily one-to-one when it comes to the notation either. Although that is not a bad point. It is pretty much, I mean, everywhere, standard notation. There's different words for different things in other places. I think it's Germany. The B flat is actually an H, if I recall. Let me double check. Okay, so I'm backwards. The B natural is an H, and B flat is still B flat. Okay, Spanish is more theoretical than music theory because they do it differently in different places. That doesn't make it theoretical. That just, makes it localized. The reason we call it theory is because it is not set in stone. Things are always changing. If it were set in stone, then we would still be applying the rules of classical music theory to everything, and jazz would not have expanded on music theory. We wouldn't have had things like serialism. We wouldn't have had, even chromatic experimentation in the Romantic period, because the theory is always changing. Because theory is always changing, even today theory is changing. I mean, just look at, some of the posts that we've had here. If you use the key of C major and start on F and go through the triad progression, and if you use the Megatron Autobot sound wave, cancer treatment stuff. So this is like conflating the idea that we can understand something and have standards about it with it being a complete and final evolution of the thing. That's just not the case. Okay, I think that is all the posts that I wanted to cover today. If this helped at all, let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe, follow the channel. Head over to greenkeymusic.com, check out the blog, reach out via the contact form for some lessons, private lessons. And if you have any other questions about music theory, or if I, embarrassed myself in any way, leave a note in the comments and I'll try to address that in the next video. But until then, have a good night, musicians.